We came into this year with a probability of recession of about 15%. Right now, we're probably about 50 or 60%. The uncertainty that sort of evolved over the past 3 months has been astonishing. When we look at the number of nights being stayed in short-term rentals in urban areas, we are now below the levels that we saw in 2018. Hotels are really just doing well in terms of both getting new regulation enacted that really limits short-term rental growth and then able to grow overall inventory. I think the theme of the summer is going to be supply growth is going to continue to be constrained. We're not going to see any magic happen on home values. We're not going to see interest rates magically come back down.
Welcome to Alex and Annie, the real women of vacation rentals. I'm Alex.
And I'm Annie.
And we've got Jamie Lane from AirDNA on the show, Chief Economist. Jamie, so good to see you today.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. I've been listening, I feel like, for years, this podcast. It's one of my favorite ones, and so excited to finally be here as a guest.
Oh, gosh, it feels like a long time coming. And I feel like we talk to you a lot because we see you at shows and you're always presenting things. And I know I reach out to you a lot for some insight. We were just talking off camera how your title is Chief Economist. And so everything with the economy is up in question. So I would imagine that you are a hot commodity at gatherings with friends, even though you're like a VR person. This is you look at the numbers that affect everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're recording on a Friday. Today was Jobs Friday. Jobs numbers came out. So I'm still like digging into all the other sort of economic figures outside of our industry too, because it's so important for like where the industry is going, the health of the economy, and our consumers, our guests still going to be booking and coming up this summer. So yeah, there's so much going on right now. Absolutely.
Well, why don't we, before we get started, just kind of give a little background on you? I feel like people know you, but maybe just a little background for those that don't.
Yeah, so I've been an economist for the past 15 years. I spent 10 years in the hotel industry. So at a company called PKF Hospitality Research, which was then acquired by CBRE. And my job was to predict the future of hotel demand, hotel revenues, hotel ADRs at a market and country level, so for the United States. And then at the end of my time at CBRE, I was managing a team of 9 economists covering all of the commercial real estate industry, so office, industrial, multifamily, retail, and hotels. I realized I really missed the hospitality industry, getting to do it every day. So I had been a customer of AirDNA at that point for 5 years. This was in 2020. The founder reached out to me and was like, "Hey, Jamie, we'd love for you to come on full time." And we made it work. So now I've been at AirDNA for 5 years, and it's really my job to dig into the data, help sort of explain what we're seeing in the data, how the industry's trending, what's doing well, what's not doing well, how to think about revenue management going forward, and then really help all the sort of players in the industry figure out how to plan for the days, weeks, months, years ahead. And it's been a ton of fun being part of the vacation rental industry.
I imagine, in your line of work, these last couple of years must have just been fascinating too, right? Of like how much you can predict and how much is how close you get, or sometimes, obviously there's some things we can't totally predict. I mean, you don't have a complete crystal ball, but just out of curiosity, I mean, like what has been the biggest surprise to you maybe in the last couple of years of just, nationwide, how STR trends have been after COVID?
I'll tell you, I joined at the end of 2020. By the first quarter of 2021, I was putting my first models together to start forecasting the industry. And so I presented it internally and I was like, guys, we're at the peak and things are going down from here. And they're like, Jamie, like your first industry forecast
is a gloom. Yeah, doom and gloom.
Is doom and gloom. And I'm like, guys, we're at occupancy levels that the industry's never seen. Like we've seen this total collapse in supply. It's gone down 20% during COVID. Like things are gonna get better in terms of supply growth. Like the demand's not gonna keep up, and we're gonna see occupancy declines. And they're like, Jamie, we trust you, but like this is really go out on a limb here because like everyone's saying like that this is the best and that things are only going to get better, and it was sort of coming in with a contrarian view, and it ended up being right. And we all saw that 2021 ended up being the peak, and like looking back on it, like it has been a wild ride. We saw this really compressed cycle. Like typically economic cycles are like 10 years long. For and where you go from the trough up and you grow, you get peak occupancies, like you're able to grow rates, like, and then you go through a down cycle, like, and we've seen that compressed into the past 4 years. It's been wild to see in terms of industry performance and sort of and how much impact it's had on operators, how much impact it's had on tech companies in the space, how much really impact it's had on people trying to invest in the space of just, and usually the best predictor of the future is what happened like in the prior year, but that has not been the case over the past couple of years. You really have to have a forward view on where the industry is going to really make correct decisions in this sort of environment.
It's been crazy, and so I wanted to ask you, like, on that, like, this year, I think that there was a lot of hope. I mean, there's hope whenever a new administration comes in, and there would be this administration was kind of deemed like very pro business and, growth and that kind of thing. And just kind of some of the things that have happened in the last, 90 days or so have been really kind of eye-opening to people in that nobody could really tell where we were going. So anybody's forecast, I was reading about all the companies that just said, you know what, we just have to throw a forecast out and kind of wait and see what happens. So from your perspective, I mean, what are you guiding people to do? Is it really just a wait and see, or just kind of hold the line? I mean, what is your recommendation for people right now, given the kind of, I guess, volatility? Because it's not just US, it's a kind of a global impact.
Yeah. So we came into this year with, and I like to think about it in sort of probabilities. And we came into this year with a probability of recession of about 15%. And that's about on average, like a recession happens every 7 to 8 years. You sort of divide that out. It's about 15%. It's just a normal probability of recession. Right now, we're probably about 50 or 60%. Like the uncertainty that sort of evolved over the past 3 months has been astonishing. So there's different indices that I sort of track that sort of measure uncertainty in the economy. There's forecasters that I sort of track on terms of and what their probability of recession, what their baseline outlook is. And essentially, most out there have ratcheted up the probability of recession. And there's sort of clear factors out there of like, with all this talk about tariffs, with all this talk about sort of changing economic environment, sort of pullback on government spending, it really has decreased people's ability to plan. And when you can't plan, a lot of times you just pause or you start to pull back. And that's what we've seen a ton of businesses and even consumers out there doing is, you know what? I'm just going to pause. I'm going to wait to see how things plan out. And a lot of aspects of the economy are really built on growth. And if you don't see people spending, if you don't see them sort of making forward purchases, then and you're going to start seeing and different aspects of our economy start to pull into recession. We just listened to all the airlines and report earnings about 2 weeks ago, and they called it. They're like, we are in a travel recession for an aspect of our business. And the aspect of the business that they called out was their sort of main cabin leisure travelers. So those travelers are on the lower end of the income spectrum that are traveling domestically. They're like, we're seeing that down 5 to 10%. And that is, and for me, sitting in my seat of like, and being a travel economist and sort of trying to interpret what we're seeing happening in the overall economy and what that's doing in terms of impacting travel, like the canary in the coal mine for me is what's happening on airlines. Because if you think of the travel and sort of purchase journey, people always start with their flight, then they book accommodation, and then they book sort of experiences. So the fact that we started to hear from the airlines that they're seeing some real softness in bookings, now you fast forward 2 to 3 weeks, me looking at our data, like we're looking at summer forward booking trends, like we're clearly seeing occupancy pacing down about 3 to 4% in the budget and economy type rentals out there. And it's really across the board from vacation rental markets to urban markets, much more so though in the urban markets that we're seeing the softness than right now in the vacation rental markets. But on the lower income, on the lower end of the spectrum for listings, like we're clearly seeing some weakness right now.
That's interesting. Yeah, I remember seeing a post after your presentation at VR Nation last week that you talked about how you were saying that the hotels are still just really killing it in the urban markets over the STRs. But I'm interested in that because we had these gals from Roar in New York City on our show last summer, right when the regulations came down on the city. But is that looking at are they so much further ahead because of the cities where there are not short-term rentals anymore? Or, I mean, is that like what's happened there? Like, why would people go back to hotels, do you think?
Yeah. So when we look at the number of nights being stayed in short term rentals in urban areas, we are now below the levels that we saw in 2018, almost back
And
to
is that just
2017
because of the
levels.
regulations, though, you think? Because they're not
A
able to
big
book?
part of it is regulation. So
Yeah.
there's just been an inability to grow supply in some of
Mhm.
these urban corridors, but also many of the business models that were really popular for short-term rentals in urban areas. So think like rental arbitrage.
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Those are
a-
gone.
Most of those companies have really gone away, and the ones that are still around, and there's some great examples of Romy, Saunders still and in the game, but they've really changed the model from rental arbitrage to more management, and the management fees, not being able to go and take sort of big chunks of buildings without and it just becomes harder to grow supply. It becomes harder to maintain supply, and yeah, you combine that with regulation, and it's really been a tough operating environment. And then that's sort of absent of what's happening on the hotel side. And in hotels right now, if you want to finance a new hotel investment, if you're not in some of the largest like 25 markets using a Hilton or Marriott sort of branded hotel, no one's going to be financing that new construction. So we're only seeing overall about 0.5% overall increase in supply in the hotel industry, but that's like entirely concentrated in the urban markets. So supply in the urban markets growing 2.5, 3%. Supply in urban markets for short-term rentals was actually down last year. So we're just seeing hotels continue to take back share. And that's all the while every other location type sort of outside of the urban core, short-term rentals are dominating. It's just, and there's this sort of idiosyncratic thing in the urban areas where hotels are really just and doing well in terms of both getting new regulation enacted that really limits short-term rental growth, and then able to grow overall inventory.
Do you aggregate timeshare data as well?
No, that's one of the industries that I don't have much visibility. I'm not sure there's a ton of overall visibility out there. Yeah.
Yeah. It would be fascinating to know because in a lot of these destinations, like you said, there's not new properties being built, but the flags, yes. But in Myrtle Beach market, most of the new properties, they're timeshare properties and they're gorgeous. I mean, and a lot of people are staying at them. And it's just, in my experience working with the CVB and the Chamber of Commerce, we never could figure it out either. But when we're all saying it's slow on an April weekend, but you go downtown and the whole beach is packed. Well, I mean, there's a lot of people that they've got coming in on these mini vacs that they're trying to sell on timeshare tours. So I don't know how that compares, but I mean, it would be fascinating to know. And a lot of the timeshare vacation club companies, they're renting that inventory as a short-term rental anyways on vacation rental OTAs or on regular hotel OTAs. So I mean, they're distributing like we do, but for some reason they've just got their own kind of gate there we can't get behind.
Yeah, and I do have ways of sort of tracking them if they're on the OTAs.
Yeah,
So we typically sort of pull them out of our core database because they're not sort of traditional vacation rentals, but we
yeah.
do sort of track them separately, the overall inventory of timeshare listings that are showing
Mhm.
up on the OTAs, similar to hotels that list on Airbnb, Vrbo,
Right.
Booking.com, and we're tracking them. We sort of remove them from the overall inventory that we sort of report on, but they're and clearly like, and even on the latest Airbnb earnings call, like Brian Chesky sort of called out, like we don't have enough urban inventory. We see so many eyeballs still coming to our site. Like they're going to have to figure out how to get more sort of hotel inventory to sort of and sort of satisfy guests that are coming to the platform. If not, people are going to stop coming. So I do suspect that you'll actually see in the next either few months to a couple of years and Airbnb actually surfacing more hotel options on their site, especially in areas where they've been regulated out or they don't have a lot of inventory.
Yeah, I know, at NextPax, we've been seeing quite a bit of our hotel partners actually list their suites and their larger configuration of rooms on the traditional VR, and that's been going on for a while. But now it's more widely accepted. Like, the brands aren't as, there's not as much stigma on doing it that way as opposed to being on the hotel site. But had a question related to regulations and regulatory. Is that something that you guys are constantly tracking so you know when something is implemented, how that is gonna potentially impact a market so you can forecast it for future?
Yeah, for the markets that we forecast, and we forecast like the 50 largest sort of vacation rental markets in the United States, we're keeping an eye on regulation, sort of trying to incorporate that both historically of like if a new regulation comes in, being able to track what that impact is, and making sure, and it's not getting picked up incorrectly in the model of like, all right, there's a big supply happening in New York, like you don't want that to get picked up with some other variable and not have the sort of forecast start to work. So you got to sort of control for those regulations that come in. And then we work very closely with Verma, with Rent Responsibly, with Airbnb, with Verbo to sort of track regulation as they're being proposed, as they're sort of going through sort of city council review, and then ultimately either shut down or enacted to measure what the impact is going to be, both on the front end and then on the back end once things have actually been enacted.
Gotcha. And, relative to data, I'm curious, do you guys aggregate or use any, like, real estate data like Zillow or any of those sites that have are you using that as well? And I guess more to that, like, do you use that just as a idea of what the real estate costs versus what they should be able to get on a rental? Or is it helping to forecast, like, I don't even know, like, what you would actually do
Oh.
with it all, but it seems like it'd take you multiple different directions, I guess, is what my point is, and what
Yeah.
specific use is it to you on the front end, and then where do you take it from there?
Yeah, it was one of the biggest questions when we first came in and wanted to start forecasting the industry is like, how do we forecast supply? It's like when you're forecasting hotels, you get a construction pipeline. We sort of know when something's sort of in planning, final planning, when it goes under construction and when it's scheduled to open, and like essentially just put in those dates and you got to forecast the supply. So we had to be a lot more thoughtful in how to do it for short-term rentals. And it really comes into, all right, what do we think is predictive of new supply? And it's really that ratio of how much you can earn relative to how much it costs to actually buy that asset. So we're looking at home values relative to average annual revenue potential, and tracking that sort of ratio of, okay, if you had invested at this time, you'd generate this much profit for adding a new short-term rental in the market, versus if you invest at this time. And what we saw during the pandemic was essentially like interest rates were low, home values were still relatively low, and revenues were going through the roof. So that to us sort of predicted we were about to see a big supply boom, and that's what subsequently happened. And now you're a period where home values are very elevated, interest rates are through the roof. We're still close to 7%, and rental revenues have come down pretty substantially over the past 3 years. Like that to us tells us that supply growth should be pretty muted. And the average sort of mountain market this past month, we saw supply growth of 1.5%. You go back 3 years ago, it was growing at 20%. So we found this actually be, and using the combination of housing data and short-term rental performance data, and then layering on top of that interest rates, has been very predictive of future supply growth for short-term rentals. And that's how we sort of marry the data together.
Well, Florida has to have been fun to predict with our real estate like it is right now.
Yeah, and throw into that a few hurricanes, like yeah.
Yeah, 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 and insurance is a whole other factor, but yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I don't, you're not tracking directly other spending within a destination, but one thing we, tend to see when there is a recession or people are pulling back they're still going to take a vacation. I mean, everybody still wants to have their family vacation. They might not take as many extra trips. Dad might not get to go on the golf trip or mom on the girls' getaway, but they're going to take their family trip. But when they get to a destination, typically they also pull back on going out to eat or doing attractions. And this sometimes works out good for companies that have larger inventory because they're pooling more people to come together and stay in one place. But has that been what you've seen this year so far too, as far as the larger accommodations?
Yeah, and we actually did a big study on this last summer. And I work very closely with a company called STR, which is terrible name,
Yeah.
given that
The
it's sort
Star
of
Report or
Star Report.
yeah, the Star
yeah,
Report. So
the
Smith
Star
Travel
Report. Yeah,
Research.
yeah,
It's travel
So
research.
they
yeah,
they track the entire hotel industry,
yeah.
and
Before
uh,
SDR was even a term.
Right.
right. So
Yeah.
I'm good friends with their SVP of analytics, and sort of he came to me and he was like, Jamie, we're seeing this really weird phenomenon in a lot of these sort of leisure destination markets. We're seeing pretty significant demand declines. And we're in this, in past couple of years, we've been, I wouldn't say a really strong economic environment, especially on the lower end where inflation's really been hurting lower income consumers. And he's like, what we want to do is look at, and can we see these travelers sort of trading out of hotels and into short-term rentals? So what we did is we combined all of our data. We really took a really granular view, and it was exactly what you said, Alex. It was that lower-end consumers were trading. Maybe they would have been getting 2 or 3 hotel rooms. They were then renting larger vacation rentals to sort of spread out that cost and also be able to save costs on all the ancillary expenses that go along with these trips. Where when we looked at the total room nights being sold in that market, they were staying essentially even, but we were seeing anywhere from a 10 to 15% increase in vacation rental demand and a 5 to 10% decrease in hotel demand, all within the same market at the same periods. So there's clearly evidence of consumers pulling back, but pulling back by sort of changing how they were spending. And that's one of the things I'm watching very closely in the data now is, do we see this sort of telltale sort of symptoms of a recession? And that typically comes with consumers trading down. So where you would have stayed maybe in an upscale luxury property that you rent a mid-scale or a budget, like you're going to take that trip. Like everyone's going to take their summer travel this summer, but you're going to start looking for ways to save money. The other ways usually see it show up in the data is that people start to take shorter trips. Like maybe you would have booked for 7 days, like, let's go for 5 or 6 days instead, because that can save anywhere from 15, 20% on the total cost of the trip. So as we look at the data today, we're not seeing that. Right now, what it looks like is, and especially on the lower end, is that people are delaying their bookings for summer travel. And it's not that they're not going to make those bookings, it's just that they haven't made them yet compared to the amount of bookings that have been made in prior years. And we're still seeing very strong bookings at the upper tier. So upscale luxury properties booking just as strong as they did last year. So that's where we don't see the signs yet of trade down. We don't see the signs yet of sort of booking shorter trips. Right now, it's like the higher income folks are feeling great, they're booking. And then we've just seen a little bit of pause at the lower end of sort of waiting to see how things play out.
We'll be back in just a minute after a word from our premier brand sponsor, Boom.
Hi, my name is Fred Boothby with Enjoy Unique Stays. Our main market is Chattanooga, Tennessee, but we do have some properties in Southwest Michigan and also in Western North Carolina. We have about 110 plus properties in our portfolio. The most challenging parts about running a vacation rental business is accounting. Trust accounting is always a big challenge. Operations is always a challenge. When we decided to move to Boom, there was several problems we're trying to solve or things we're trying to accomplish. One was, we wanted to be with a company that we felt valued customer service, valued our recommendations for product update requests, was responsive. Now we're certainly using it for reviews, responding to reviews. We're using it for the unified inbox, all the guest communication. We're doing a lot of accounting in there. And they have a wonderful task management. I would absolutely refer friends and colleagues to Boom. I do it quite frequently. I'm a big fan of Boom. But if you're not looking for a dinosaur and you're looking for something that's going to be relevant into the future in what I think will be a very big and meaningful way, even if you think, hey, we're not really ready to switch to Boom, you need to be talking to them, because seeing where they're at right now, where they're going, there's a lot of great things happening there.
Head over to boomnow.com to see a demo of this revolutionary software, and be sure to include that you heard about Boom on the Alex and Annie podcast. Our listeners receive 50% off onboarding fees, and the first month is free. Go to boomnow.com and see for yourself how AI is revolutionizing the future of property management systems.
Do you think, there's been a lot of conversation about the impact of Canadian travelers. I mean, I think that impacts like Florida in the winter. I mean, like I think people are looking towards winter time already thinking, how is this going to impact? But generally speaking, just like for this year, how do you think international travel is going to impact? I personally think okay, well, that just means people in the US are not going to travel outside. So it kind of goes back to the COVID timeframe where they couldn't leave the country or weren't going to leave the country. So they traveled internally in the drive market and that type of thing. But do you think that there is a larger impact that we haven't recognized yet of kind of the global implication of everybody's economy right now?
Yeah, and we're definitely seeing the impact. It's really a market by market phenomenon. In March, we clearly saw it in South Florida markets. We clearly saw it in Hawaiian markets, where there was a pullback from Canadian travelers. Overall, they booked about 15% fewer nights in March than they did in the year prior, which is, on the surface, that's a lot, but only about 2% of demand for US stays comes from Canada. So, and it can be significant in those sort of Florida, Hawaii markets in the winter. It can be significant for markets like Buffalo, Niagara Falls area, the Adirondacks, the Cascade Mountains, sort of all those border areas during the summer. There are a lot of Canadians sort of come down for summer travel. So we're very much sort of watching that. And those, like Buffalo market, 12% of demand comes from Canadian travelers. So if you lose that portion,
Yeah, they got to keep going more south. I mean, it's not it's not warm in Buffalo. Oh my God.
It's
compared to
Buffalo's
Canada in the summer, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a beautiful area to go in the summer. I wouldn't go there in the winter. No. Yeah.
Definitely wouldn't do the winter.
And then you're also seeing a clear pullback from Western European countries. So German travelers to the US in March was down 30%. French travelers, and those type of travelers are typically going to the urban markets. So think Miami, San Francisco, Boston, Chicago, not necessarily much in the sort of traditional vacation rental market. So I was just looking at the data prior to VR Nation, and the market with the least exposure to international travelers, it's like the Ozark Mountains, Ozark Lakes, like Branson, Missouri area. They see less than 1% of demand come from international travelers. Like I've got a vacation rental up in North Georgia. It's about 2% of demand. Like any sort of impact from international travelers on those markets is going to be immaterial. But if you're in Orlando,
I was going to say, what about Orlando? Yeah, that's got to be a pretty significant number, right?
30% of demand comes from international travelers in Orlando.
Yeah.
So when we're seeing right now and expected, and I wouldn't put out the window that we see a decline of anywhere from 15 to 20% this summer from international travelers coming into the US, that is going to be a big factor. And what we know about international guests is they typically come and they stay longer. They have a higher propensity to book short-term rentals than hotels because they are staying longer. They're willing to spend more for that sort of international trip. So I think we're just at the sort of tip of the iceberg in terms of the impact that we're going to see from international travelers. Because and we've got the pause for 90 days on tariffs, but I don't expect us to see resolution before we really get through that summer booking window. which is just causing, and just the and perception of sort of this debate is causing international travelers to pull back.
Yeah, and especially after the last couple years, I feel like everybody that I know and I'm friends with on Facebook went to Italy or Greece or somewhere in Europe in the last couple years, including Annie and I. We went to Italy last fall, but that and then just last year, I feel like cruises. Everybody was going on cruises. I mean, as far as the international travel is concerned, I think just from what we're hearing, there's when Americans are going over to Europe and stuff like there's just a lot of it's not really there's been some bad experiences, I guess. So I think that's making people kind of shy away from, is this the year to just stick around home and, go to some of the places that maybe we haven't been in a few years because we've been cruising and going all over the world, which should work out well, I would think, for the drive to destinations. But have you been seeing pickup in drive to this year?
So the problem is right now we're seeing international guests not come to the US, and we're still seeing Americans traveling overseas at the sort of same levels and even a slight uptick than what we've seen in prior years.
Oh,
So,
really? Okay. I was wrong then.
so
I was thinking that it was less
yeah,
people
so
actually
so
coming
so
overseas,
so
but
far, we're not seeing sort of a change in U.S. travel preferences overseas. Now, we have over the past couple of weeks seen the dollar really depreciate relative to the euro, which is, and Europe's been on sale for the past few years, like it's in terms of the exchange rate, and the fact that the dollar has depreciated, that makes that European trip a little bit more expensive. Maybe makes you a bit more likely to stay domestic. So, and I think that's one of the questions sort of heading into the summer is, do we see sort of fewer Americans booking overseas trips? As we've seen in the data and as we've heard from the airlines when they're reporting, they're not seeing any weakness yet in Americans booking trips overseas. And that's showing up in our data as well. Like European short-term rental performance is booming. Demand is still growing close to 10%. Like all the real weakness we see right now is in the industry is almost entirely focused around U.S. sort of U.S. Bookings and U.S. Listing performance.
So we could talk about all of this data and all of your predictions and all of the economy all day long, but you're here, you are with AirDNA. So I would love to learn more about what AirDNA has going on, maybe some new product lines, developments, things that property managers would be keen to learn.
Yeah, so one of my favorite things to talk about right now, and it's exciting to talk about because it's like the biggest complaint that I get from property managers. So talking to property managers, they're like, Jamie, they're like, I love your data, but I hate your rentalizer tool. And for those of you that don't know, our rentalizer tool is like our calculator. So like any investor, homeowner can go
right.
on,
Oh, yeah, we get
put
lots
their
of people
address,
talking about that.
yeah, put their address into AirDNA, and it sort of spits out an estimate. And whether it's high or low, like a property manager is going to sort of dispute it. But what we have coming out now is finally the ability to analyze all of those comps going into it and remove comps that aren't actually a good comp for that property. So what we're encourage investors to do and what we encourage property managers to do is sort of use that sort of report as an initial conversation to sort of go through those comps. Because what we've been trying to get better and better at is that comp selection process. So what are the homes in that market that are representative of that home that you're looking to buy or that you're looking to list with the property manager? What are the other homes sort of similar to it that are sort of a good representation of what that home could earn? And then making sure that and all the amenities, the right location, everything sort of aligns with that sort of new property. And if there's one or two that aren't, that you can click onto the report, remove them, and generate a new number. And so now that becomes a much easier conversation with a property manager of like, oh yeah, I ran your numbers too through the rentalized report. Here's the property that I don't think is good comp. If you click and remove it, that number actually now aligns with what I think you could earn. You can regenerate the report, and then it sort of becomes a conversation piece. And then also property managers can generate their own reports, sort of with the comps that they think are representative, print it out and say, here's the AirDNA report that I ran for your property. And this reflects on what we think it could earn if it was part of our program. So really excited about that. There's now the ability to save those reports, print them to PDF, and then we're going to be adding some fun stuff on where property managers can add their own branding to the report. It will automatically sort of stamp them with who generated it, so you can know whether someone sort of edited it themselves or it was sort of system generated. And then we've got some really fun sort of additional tools and dashboards specifically for vacation rental managers to be able to track their portfolio, their reviews, their ratings, and really dive into how they're performing relative to other property managers in their market. So yeah, lots going on at AirDNA for vacation rental managers today.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it definitely is. Is there like any sort of, just trying to think of like, as a property manager, the best way to grow inventory is through referrals and working with realtors. I mean, no matter how great a homeowner marketing you have, that's consistently what we see is working the best in these markets. But is there anything, or have you thought of any way that, the realtors that are using AirDNA of like doing some sort of a partnership where it's like, almost like on Zillow when you're looking at a house and like, here's some realtors that could help you, but for them, like, this is what we think it should do. But if you really want to be sure, here are some local rental managers that like you could check with.
Yeah, we actually have that program on AirDNA with referrals for property managers and referrals for real estate agents. So if
Oh,
you're
okay.
looking at AirDNA, we actually now have every single home in the MLS on our platform. Just like if you're going on Zillow, you can go on AirDNA and see every single home available for sale. And we've run each home through our rental calculator to show what we think it could earn as a short-term rental. And then you see on that page too, like who the real estate agent is that's sort of selling that property. And it makes it a great way to be able to monitor your market, what homes are coming for sale, which ones seem like they could be good short-term rentals. So if you're a vacation rental manager, like be able to go into there, like here are the top 15 homes for sale in my submarket right now. Here's who's listing them. Like, let me proactively reach out to them of like, and these do look like they'd be great as rentals in my market. And let me go ahead and share with them what I think it could earn relative to the AirDNA estimate. And that it can be a great proactive way to start growing your referral network.
But there's no like direct connection for real estate agents or the general public to see potential property managers for them.
Yeah, there is. So if you're on that page, you can actually click like connect with the property manager. And we work with a lot of sort of local property managers to where they're and sort of saying what their ideal type of lead is. And we're sort of qualifying those and then connecting them through as lead gen for them. Because we've
And
got
how do companies get involved in that to be on that
uh,
page?
yeah, they can reach out to my colleague, Sarah Dupree. She's been running that program, and we've got sort of connections to a bunch of different property management companies. We've sort of been running it as a pilot over the past year, just trying to get a sense of how many leads we get, how good are those leads, how are we seeing them sort of convert to actual leads for them. And I think so far it's been doing well. I haven't kept entirely up to date with how it's doing, but yeah, Sarah Dupree on my team is the person that's been running it.
Okay. Yeah, I bet you're gonna get a lot of people that will hear this and be interested in that. So we'll definitely have to maybe add Sarah's contact information into the show notes too.
Yeah.
She might say uncle after a while, but
Yeah.
Right.
yeah. No, I think that's good. I think one of the things that we've heard over time is the frustration from managers in that sometimes realtors don't necessarily have the right data to make good predictions on what a rental could produce, and they come in with false expectations. And we've seen a lot of it in, I think, we talked to people in the Tennessee market. The Florida Panhandle struggles with that a lot because some of these houses sold for ridiculous prices. And, they were forecasting, like, let's face it, right after COVID, people were able to get prices that they'll never get, not only for the sale, but also for the rental. And that's obviously kind of gone away. So I think being able to aggregate that data where somebody can access and make good decisions all the way around is super helpful. So glad that you guys are doing that. I did want to ask, you guys, at this point, it's data that you're getting from Airbnb and VRBO, but there's potential of getting other OTA data in there. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. So how we collect the data, we are scraping data off of Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, and then we're looking at sort of movements in the calendar. So the fact that we're picking up sort of a series of dates going unavailable in your calendar, we then model whether that was booked or blocked. So because we're collecting the data off of Airbnb, but it's representative of all the bookings that you're getting on the property, not just what comes through Airbnb. So it's collecting data on direct bookings, it's collecting data on bookings coming through any other channel. Um, and we've been making really big strides recently into really refining and improving the accuracy of those estimates of booked first blocked. It has become more difficult, but we still have great accuracy of predicting the revenue that associated with each of those bookings. And now we've got data going back 10 years. So when you think about sort of through cycles and what happened during COVID, and what's a more representative number, whether it's pre-COVID, whether it's last year, like we do give you the ability to sort of see what was going in the market back in 2017, 18, 19, what's going in the market now, how does that compare to what was seen in 21 and 22? So it lets you sort of piece together that complete picture of market performance, which I think is, and given that we've been in the industry now for so long, it's hard to think that AirDNA was started back in 2014. I'm now thinking a few companies now that have been around on the tech side is like Price Labs, Guesty, AirDNA, all started like within like a couple months of each other and are now all just sort of past their sort of 10-year anniversary.
So off that, I feel like there had been a challenge with sometimes looking at data and saying, is this a gross revenue number, like a gross rent number, or are you able to pull fees out? So I imagine that now, because we're going to have to be going to the fees are included in the quotes, that it's a little easier. But is that going to upend past numbers when you're trying to forecast for future? Because everything, I feel like it's going to be cleaner now. There's not going to be that question because you'll know for sure. But I know that was always something that we asked the question was like, is this including fees or is it not? So kind of maybe talk me through that.
So our estimates of revenue is a gross revenue number. It is inclusive of cleaning fees. And actually now when you click on any Rentalizer report, in the calculator, you can actually see the breakout of cleaning fees. We're still collecting cleaning fees and breaking those out in our data set. So far we haven't lost that ability to see it in the scrapes. But what it does not include is any additional service fees, any additional taxes, and it's sort of that gross number before any management fees are taken out. So our definition has been sort of consistent over time. Absolutely, we can probably do a better job of and letting people know like what it includes, what it doesn't include, but it is sort of that nightly rate, tack on top of that and the cleaning fee associated with the reservations and any additional fees on top of that, extra guest fees, additional management fees, anything like that aren't included in that overall number.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, we're almost at the midpoint of the year, Jamie. So any last minute predictions while we've got you here for 2025?
What stock should I buy? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say, and I think the theme of the summer is going to be and continuing shorten booking windows. Like we already started to hear it at VR Nation. I think you're going to hear it from more and more people that last minute bookings are coming in, but the ability to plan has and sort of expect those further out bookings has just really been reduced given all the uncertainty in the market out there. I think the good thing for operators is that I think supply growth is going to continue to be constrained. We're not going to see any magic happen on home values. We're not going to see interest rates magically come back down. And I think the sort of further market uncertainty is going to really cause investors sort of pull back, not adding new supply into that market. And so for all of us out there that are managing, not I'm hoping that we don't see a whole lot of new competition coming out there, I think there's going to be some good news. But for those maybe property managers sort of hoping for a whole lot of new home sales, a lot of referrals, sort of potential to grow inventory through new homes getting bought and sold, like that's not going to be out there. It's going to be more of what inventory is already out there, and how much you can sort of convince maybe smaller mid-size operators, owners sort of using small and mid-size operators to sort of convert over to you. And it's going to be sort of a fixed pie out there. And how can you take a greater share of that pie?
A lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bumpy summer.
I think that's a great way to describe it, a bumpy summer. I'm still not predicting recession. I wouldn't say very confident, but I'm feeling pretty good that we're going to be able to sort of get through this. Q1 was weak. Q2's not looking super strong, but it's not looking so bad that I feel I'm confident that we're going into recession. And if we sort of skate through it, kind of like what we did in 2023, like we could all like feel the weakness, but it wasn't so much weakness that we were seeing a big pullback in consumer demand. I think most of us are going to be able to get through this, and you're going to tighten belt. We're going to have to really manage expenses carefully. And once we get through this, like travel is one of these industries, like it's up and to the right, and short-term rentals, vacation rentals are still getting adopted by more and more consumers. We're overall stealing share back from hotels. And I think this category is still the category that I think is going to be the long-term winner for accommodations, and super excited to be part of it and tracking it.
Yeah, definitely the year to sharpen your pencil, try and find new ways to grow revenue, diversify. I mean, I got to get creative again. It isn't just going to come to us like we've had in years past. So a little bit more difficult business climate, I guess. But so good to have you, Jamie. Always insightful to listen to you and kind of follow your predictions, which seem to be pretty spot on as far as what we've heard over the years. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to contact?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. Search Jamie Lane and you'll find it. I do host a podcast called the STR Data Lab, where we sort of dig into the weekly trends. And then me and my team write a free blog on the AirDNA website where we sort of track industry performance. So if you want some great free data, sort of check that out. We put it out every month, and it can sort of give you that sort of high level breakdown, what we're seeing in different types of markets, and making sure you're staying on top of the trends, because it is going to be, I think, a very interesting summer in terms of how performance evolves.
Well, we'll have you back in the fall to have hopefully it's not a postmortem. Hopefully it's just
Celebration. End of the year party. It was way better.
Yeah.
He was
It was
so
way
wrong.
better than we thought. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're going to be wrong, at least hopefully it's something that like went great and everybody did well. Oh,
absolutely. That'd be fun.
If anybody wants to get in touch with Annie now, you can go to alexandanniepodcast.com. And until next time, thanks for tuning in.